Welcome, everyone. Today's webinar, we will be exploring the risks associated with alcohol and chronic disease, including cancer, as well as how alcohol might even support longevity, as demonstrated by a lot of epidemiological data. This is an incredible complex topic, and we do know that alcohol can be an addictive substance. And although we do have a lot of research on this topic, the research is also very contradictory. We will also have a Q&A session that will follow the webinar and provide you all with the opportunity to ask questions about this topic at the end. But first, briefly, we are all going to introduce ourselves.
Thank you, Frida. I just want to take a moment and introduce myself. My name is Jessica Harrison. I am a registered dietitian, and I'm also the clinical coordinator at Create Cures Foundation Clinic in Santa Monica, where we are able to welcome a range of different patients into the clinic. And we would love to invite you to come see us after this webinar.
Thanks, Jessica and Frida. Hello, everyone. Wow, what an interesting topic. My name is Katie Reines. I'm also one of the registered dietitians at Dr. Longo's Create Cures Foundation. It is so incredible to be able to implement what the best evidence tells us about nutrition with patients. So I'm really excited to be here today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ava Coles. I am a graduate student and dietetic intern, and I'm currently an intern at the Create Cures Foundation, and I'm really excited to talk to you guys about the research on alcohol and various diseases and longevity.
Hello again. So my name is Frida. I'm also an RD at Create Cures Foundation in Santa Monica. I did both my undergrad and my master's in nutrition, and during my master's, that was when I really became fascinated by nutrition interventions that are mimicking the effects of fasting. So now I'm doing a PhD in clinical nutrition. So please subscribe to Create Cures YouTube channel to stay updated on a lot of content that we always put up there. You may also have attended our previous webinars, but if not, please check them out on this YouTube channel as well. Today's webinar will also be recorded, so you can always share it with friends and family who are not here today. We do have promotions. We're very thankful that you are attending today's webinar, and to support you to further your health journey and education, we do have a 30% off on your initial dietitian consultation using the code WINE2023. This code will expire April 12th, so please remember to take advantage of this great deal. So throughout the webinar, please use the Q&A box for any questions that you may have. The chat box will be used throughout the webinar for interactive questions.
Thank you, Frida, for that great introduction. I have been seeing a lot of people comment where they've been coming from in the chat box. So as Frida mentioned, we'll be asking questions throughout our webinar today. Please use the chat box to communicate with each other and with us. You can ask questions, but just going back, we will have time at the very end for a question and answer session. So if you want questions that you want us to address, then please input those questions into the Q&A box so that we can look through those questions. And then also any questions that aren't answered, you're welcome to email us using the email address. You can just note this down right now. We'll mention it again at the end, but the email address is clinic@createcures.org. So again, Q&A box will be for questions to answer at the end, chat boxes for interaction throughout. So a brief overview of our agenda for this webinar. This information session is super, super dense and rich with so much really valuable research. And so we are going to work to cover all of these different topics, including a brief overview of alcohol metabolism, talking about the association of alcohol consumption with specific chronic diseases, including cancers, a few different kinds of cancers, autoimmune diseases, a few different kinds of autoimmune diseases, neurodegenerative disease, heart disease, and diabetes, as well as speaking about how alcohol can fit into a longevity lifestyle. We'll talk about a few brief quiz questions, and then we have reserved some time at the end for a Q&A. So open up your chat boxes. First question of the evening is, do you think that alcohol is included in the longevity diet? What have you heard? Maybe you've heard about the blue zones, which include these communities around the world with the highest concentration of centenarians. Do you think that they include alcohol in their diet and in their lifestyle? Okay, we're getting a few yeses occasionally. Let us know what you think. Yes, yes. Awesome. Okay, so overall, yes, and a few occasionally. Okay. So looking at alcohol metabolism and really thinking about what is alcohol. So there are many factors that actually affect the metabolism and the overall absorption of ethanol, which is alcohol. And these factors include gender, age, ethnicity, and weight. So alcohol is not metabolized by every person the same. Also, I might add to that list genetics, which we will be talking about in a second. Ethanol is metabolized into acetaldehyde, which is then further broken down into acetate. It's important to note that the International Agency for Research on Cancer actually classifies acetaldehyde as a group 1 carcinogen to humans. So it is a toxin, which is important to remember. Acetaldehyde is known to generate reactive oxygen species, also known as ROS, which can lead to DNA damage, inflammation, metastasis, and angiogenesis. Alcohol can also reduce absorption of certain vitamins. Perhaps you've heard about a lot of the different B vitamins, which can also be a risk factor for some cancers. And also alcohol consumption can increase estrogen hormone levels, which is likely suspected to be the relationship between alcohol consumption and breast cancer risk. So now diving into alcohol and cancer. So nearly 4% of cancers diagnosed worldwide in 2020 can be attributed to alcohol consumption. So I'll let that sink in for a second, because 4% is actually quite small in terms of what you might expect. In the US, about 75,000 cancer cases and 19,000 cancer deaths are estimated to be linked to alcohol each year. Cancer risk is dose dependent for most cancers. So again, most cancers, relative to the amount of alcohol that is consumed, it directly relates to the increased risk in cancer, which we will be speaking about. The effect of light alcohol consumption, less than 1 drink a day, for most cancers is so minimal that it actually might be even null. So absolutely no impact. However, you can see that alcohol is related to the cancers noted on the right, including head and neck cancers, liver cancer, breast cancer, and colorectal cancer. Alcohol is not recommended for the individuals who are genetically predisposed to these cancers that I just mentioned. And also, alcohol is not recommended for individuals that have enzymatic defects. So if you are aware that you or a relative has a mutation where you do not have the enzyme alcohol dehydrogenase, then that's really important to know, because in that case, alcohol would actually not be recommended because you're not able to properly metabolize alcohol, which could then increase risk significantly. And so alcohol consumption is significantly associated with primary cancer risk for the following cancers. So the head and neck cancers that I mentioned, and really now diving into how much alcohol consumption can increase risk and why alcohol consumption is not recommended for these if you have family members or you know that you're genetically predisposed to these cancers. So for oral cavity and pharynx cancer, moderate to heavy alcohol consumption, which I just want to note in the bottom right-hand corner, is specified in terms of how many drinks per day. So heavy drinkers are classified as those who consume over 4 drinks a day. Moderate drinkers consume 1 to 4 drinks a day, and then light drinkers consume less than 1 drink a day. So moderate to heavy, so those who are consuming anywhere above 1 drink a day. The increase in risk for oral cavity and pharynx cancer is 83%, and then it jumps up to 513% increased risk for those who are consuming over 4 drinks a day, which is significant. Also really important to note is that these risks are actually then multiplied with the risk associated with tobacco use in these cancers. So the risk is actually much higher than if you were to add the risk between alcohol consumption and tobacco use. Those risks actually need to be multiplied. So if you or someone you know is a tobacco user, then alcohol would definitely not be recommended. Larynx cancer, 44% increased risk for moderate drinkers and a 265% increased risk for heavy drinkers. Esophageal cancer, any alcohol consumption can increase risk 26% or more. So in this case, if you or someone that you are related to has or had esophageal cancer, then alcohol would not be recommended. And specifically for people with this alcohol dehydrogenase enzyme deficiency, alcohol would also not be recommended because they are more at risk of developing esophageal cancer. Also, interestingly, and important to note, alcohol consumption can also be harmful in the development of second primary cancers in the upper GI tract. And then going into some other cancers that have been associated with alcohol consumption. So multiple meta-analyses. So this is not just one single study. We're talking like sometimes over 100 different studies that then were further analyzed in a larger meta-analysis, confirm the relationship between alcohol consumption and for gastric cancer, there's a 20% greater risk in heavy drinkers versus non-drinkers. However, there's no increased risk for light to moderate drinkers. So again, those that are drinking 1 to 4 drinks a day, there's actually no increased risk of gastric cancer. For heavy alcohol consumption, there is an increased risk of 207%. For colorectal cancer, moderate and heavy alcohol consumption is associated with 17% and 44% respectively. Light drinkers don't show any increased risk. And interestingly enough, the association was actually stronger in men than in women. And then for pancreatic cancer, 19% greater risk for heavy drinkers versus non-drinkers. This is a really interesting just data point to share, is that for breast cancer, there have been many epidemiological studies that have consistently confirmed the relationship between alcohol consumption and risk. For example, there was a meta-analysis done of 118 studies that demonstrated for light drinkers, there's only about a 4% increased risk, but that jumps up to 23% if for those having between 1 to 4 drinks a day. And then it increases up to 61% for those having more than 4 drinks a day. For prostate cancer, we can see a similar trajectory where there's only about a 5% increased risk for those having 1 drink a day or less, an increased risk of 9% for those having 1 to 4 drinks a day, and then big increased risk of 20% for those having more than 4% or 4 drinks a day. And no associations have been found between alcohol consumption and risk of ovary, uterus, or bladder cancer, making it difficult to draw any sort of conclusions. And there actually has been a decreased risk that has been associated with Hodgkin's and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, thyroid cancer, and kidney cancer. And so in conclusion, I know that that was just a lot of information, but overall, light to moderate drinking, so about 1 drink a day for women or 2 drinks a day for men, which is the CDC recommendation, was associated with a minimal increase for most cancers, except for the cancers that I shared with head and neck cancer, breast cancer, liver cancer, and colorectal cancer. And the risk of alcohol-related cancer is not significantly increased for light to moderate drinking in men up to 2 drinks a day who have never smoked. However, the risk of alcohol-related cancer, mainly breast cancer, increases even within that range up to 1 drink a day for women who have never smoked. So this suggests that for women, there could be more of a risk, even drinking up to 1 drink a day. And now I will pass it over to Ava.
Thank you, Jessica. That was so fascinating, and it really shows us how complex the relationship between alcohol and cancer is. I'm going to talk a little bit about autoimmune diseases, which are also very complicated. And so I'm going to just briefly go over it. If you didn't know, autoimmunity can occur when a person's immune cells mistake healthy cells for foreign cells or pathogens. And that basically means that your immune cells will start to attack your own healthy cells, and that will lead to what's called autoimmunity. And there are various different diseases which are known as autoimmune diseases, and about 24 million Americans live with this today, and the incidence has been increasing. And research is starting to point that alcohol consumption may have a negative impact on the body's immune system, and that can exacerbate symptoms associated with autoimmune disorders. So here I'm going to talk a little bit about some of alcohol's direct effects on the immune system and then indirect effects on the immune system. And this is really important to think about because anything that affects the immune system will affect autoimmune issues. And so research has found that drinking can trigger the inflammatory response, but in a dose-dependent manner. So moderate doses of alcohol may reduce inflammation, whereas high doses of alcohol can deplete immune cells and promote inflammation. Heavy drinking has also been associated with increased risk of bacterial and viral infection, according to one study. And for some of the indirect effects on the immune system, alcohol has been found in various studies to directly impair sleep quality, and that is directly related to a reduced immune function. And also heavy consumption of alcohol can lead to gut dysbiosis, which in turn can impair gut permeability, and that can lead to something called leaky gut, which eventually leads to systemic inflammation. So basically inflammation in the entire body, and that would worsen autoimmune symptoms. Just to give a little bit of an overview of 2 autoimmune issues that I sort of chose to talk about: irritable bowel syndrome and type 1 diabetes. Irritable bowel syndrome, or also known as IBS, is extremely prevalent in the United States, and it's only growing, and it's extremely complex, and a lot of people are suffering from it. So I thought it would be interesting to talk about. It's been found that heavy alcohol intake can worsen symptoms of IBS, and it's also been shown to alter the gut microbiome and reduce microbial diversity, which can, again, in turn, worsen IBS symptoms. Excessive alcohol consumption can also promote intestinal inflammation. And in type 1 diabetes, heavy drinking can lead to hypoglycemia, and that is a very important factor to consider when drinking alcohol. Chronic alcohol consumption has also been associated with increased insulin resistance, and that, again, is very important to note when you have type 1 diabetes, because these are you are very sensitive to any changes in these. However, one paper had found that light to moderate alcohol consumption might not affect blood sugar levels. So it really depends on your personal reaction to alcohol when you do drink. Interestingly, low to moderate alcohol consumption may have a positive impact on inflammation by increasing certain protective gut microbes and beneficial gut-derived anti-inflammatory fatty acids, such as short-chain fatty acids and polyunsaturated fatty acids, while increasing high-density lipoprotein, which is the good cholesterol, and nitric oxide production. However, the research is still very contradictory, and there needs to be more done to confirm this. And also, wine and beer are rich in polyphenols that can prevent suppression of the immune system. I'm going to talk a little bit about alcohol and neurodegenerative diseases, mainly about Alzheimer's. And so I'm going to start by discussing what we found about how alcohol can directly impact the brain. And it's really interesting I think just as Jessica mentioned before, drinking alcohol can promote oxidative stress in the body, and it also can directly promote oxidative stress in the brain because there would be increased production of toxic alcohol metabolites such as acetaldehyde and reactive oxygen species, or ROS. Acute and chronic alcohol consumption has also been associated with decreased endogenous antioxidants such as glutathione, which is very important for your body's ability to fight oxidative stress. Chronic excessive alcohol intake can often lead to cognitive impairment through the atrophy of white matter in the brain, through the loss of neurons, and through demyelination of brain regions. And that's basically the sheet that protects your neurons and sort of coats your neurons in the hippocampus and frontal lobe regions of the brain. And so here I sort of wanted to give a little overview of the research on how different types of drinking can impact your risk for developing developing Alzheimer's. So I'll start with light to moderate drinking. One paper found that 1 to 2 drinks per day may be protective against dementia. Another paper found that 0.5 to 7 drinks per week may not increase your risk for dementia, so it might not impact your risk. Light to moderate drinking might not impair cognitive function, and it might actually have a protective effect in older adults. However, a recent paper that I'm sure some of you might have read about was published last year that found that 1 drink a day may be associated with overall lower brain volume. Heavy drinking, as Jessica mentioned before, can have much more significant impacts on overall health and on brain health. And so more than 2 drinks per day has been found to increase the risk for Alzheimer's. Consuming more than 14 drinks per week, which is again more than 2 drinks per day, has been associated with significant increased risk for dementia. So as you can see, there are multiple papers suggesting that more than 2 drinks per day can significantly increase your risk for developing Alzheimer's or dementia. Heavy alcohol patients can even accelerate cognitive decline in Alzheimer's patients. However, there's some good news that reducing your drinking from heavy to moderate or light may reduce your risk that you would gain from the heavy drinking. So here's the second question of the webinar. Are you surprised by the associations between alcohol consumption and disease risk? Please feel free to write your answers in the chat box. We'd love to hear what you think. I see a few no's. I see a yes. Okay, I guess everyone seems pretty well informed. Okay, I'm going to move on or leave Katie to it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ava. I love how nobody's super surprised. It seems like maybe a couple of people are a little surprised, but wow, it is complex. And we're not saying to drink a lot of alcohol is going to be beneficial. It seems like it across the board so far, very, very, very small amount. The dose makes the poison. The dose makes the medicine. So it's going to be really important that we're intentional about that moving forward. And I'm excited to talk about alcohol and cardiovascular disease, the #1 killer in America. Here we have a beautiful representation from a review paper. Now, this review paper have pointed out a lot of benefits from very light to moderate drinking. So this is 1 to 2 drinks, 3 to 4 days a week. I really want to emphasize how complex this is, though, when we're taking this little amount of a drink and comparing it to people across the board. What else are they doing with their lifestyle? Maybe they were drinking a lot more and then quit and were considered abstainers of drinking. And maybe they stopped drinking because they developed heart disease. There's a lot to take into account. What else are these people eating? What else are these people doing with their lifestyle? So it's really, really difficult to test this. What's fascinating about this particular review paper is it really did show over a lot of different studies that, hey, light to moderate alcohol consumption in relation to heart disease, it's actually been shown to decrease LDL oxidation, to decrease inflammation, to increase nitric oxide release, which can help with blood pressure. And it can help with glucose uptake, improving lipid profile, decreasing inflammation, decreasing risk of stroke, like all of these amazing outcomes. And it's like, oh my goodness, decreasing oxidative stress and decreasing atherosclerosis risk, which leads to heart attack. What is this? Is this a magic pill? Should we all be drinking alcohol? Like, what's the deal with this? And going on to the next slide, there's an assumption around here, maybe it's the flavonoids, okay? So some major sources of flavonoids are red wine, tea, fruits, and vegetables. There's a pretty potent flavonoid in the skin of red grapes, and that's associated with red wine, right? That could be the reason for this decrease of cardiovascular disease risk. Now, thinking about this, moving forward, this was a huge paper. This was over 300,000 people involved. And this took more into account the differences between, okay, were these people abstainers, or did they quit after they got sick? Did they quit drinking already because they were sick? Or there's so many compounding factors here. And what they found in a more recent paper was that a dose response very much increasing risk of hypertension or high blood pressure and coronary artery disease. The risk of both of those diseases increase with an increase of alcohol consumption, no matter how much. So it's really interesting how controversial this is, and we can dive deeper into this. One big reason for heart attacks and strokes, the main cause is high blood pressure. And studies have shown over and over that alcohol does cause vasoconstriction and hypertension or high blood pressure, which is likely the reason why research has shown that with even just one drink or less per day of alcohol, it may increase risk of death from a stroke. So alcohol affects vasoconstrictor mediators and increases oxidative stress, as both Jessica and Ava mentioned, this quote unquote oxidative stress, these free radicals that are causing damage to our DNA and to our cell membranes. The alcohol is considered, as Jessica mentioned, it is considered a carcinogen, and it's going to cause a lot of stress, and increasing this stress can significantly increase our risk for high blood pressure and stroke. So a takeaway from all the research we have thus far on heart health, the risk of cardiovascular disease is quite dose dependent with alcohol. So with an increase in alcohol intake, we're going to increase our risk of cardiovascular disease. However, the benefits of light to moderate drinking may be related to community and socializing. So whenever we're laughing, we're feeling supported, we're feeling like that release of oxytocin from feeling understood and loved and able to be with other people, as well as antioxidants. So as I mentioned in a previous slide, the not at all sweet, right? The dry red wine has polyphenols that may help protect the lining of the blood vessels in our heart. One very famous one, the resveratrol, the polyphenol in the skin of red grapes. What is interesting though, there's a lot of antioxidants and polyphenols in a lot of different foods. I have a huge list on this slide right here. Apples, apricots, currants, a lot of fruits, including things like beans. Like you've probably heard that chocolate and coffee have great flavonols and polyphenols. Black beans are beans like a cacao or chocolate bean as well, or a coffee bean, right? Getting in those beans where there's a lot of polyphenols and flavonoids in there too. Don't peel your apples. The skin is where a lot of these beneficial compounds are. So what these flavonols are able to do is they're able to latch on to the reactive oxygen species, as Ava and Jessica mentioned earlier, these reactive oxygen species that destroy our cell membranes, they destroy our DNA. These flavonoids in the skin of red grapes can latch onto those and neutralize them and make it so that they don't cause any more harm. So it's really important to eat a variety of different colors, a variety of different plant foods, and not just rely on our dry red wine for our flavonols. The American Heart Association does emphasize the importance of not starting to drink if you don't already. And if you do drink, it's crucial to limit how much you drink. Pay attention to the dose. Now, alcohol and diabetes, this is quite a controversial thing to talk about. A lot of people think that alcohol is really high in sugars, really high in calories and carbs, and that may not necessarily be the case. According to a 2015 systematic review representing more than 1.9 million participants, the risk of type 2 diabetes was reduced in participants who consumed less than 63 grams or less than 4.5 drinks per week of alcohol. So this is a very small amount, right? Risks increased above this threshold, and the peak risk reduction was present between just about less than a half of an ounce, or about a half of a drink per day, right? So like a half of a glass of wine is where it was shown to be like, okay, this is fine. Reductions in risk, as I mentioned before, it may be overestimated by studies using a group that included less healthy former drinkers. So maybe people were diagnosed with diabetes or some issues, and then they stopped drinking and they were already sick, right? That's going to be a lot different than somebody who is an abstainer from birth and never drank before. Sometimes these studies combine the two in the same group, and it's a little confusing. So it's important to make that distinction. Alcohol and further effects related to diabetes. So alcohol really decreases our liver functioning, and the liver plays a huge role in the regulation of glucose metabolism. Going over that just a half of a glass of wine per day can damage our liver a lot, and it can make it so that our blood sugars are going to be out of control. Also, greater consumption associated with insufficient sleep. Getting insufficient sleep messes with our hormones, and insulin is a hormone. So it's going to mess with our capacity to listen to our intuitive hunger and fullness cues, and therefore make it so that our blood sugars are going to be out of control. Also, I've read that alcohol may be an appetite stimulant. And of course, alcohol, when we drink a little too much, it inhibits judgment about our food choices. So this is going to be important to witness, hey, am I actually hungry, or am I just a little tipsy? Use associated with poorer treatment adherence. So people who are undergoing health promoting behaviors in order to combat their type 2 diabetes. We all want to be doing health promoting behaviors like exercising, drinking plenty of water, getting good sleep, eating our vegetables. It's been documented significantly that those who drink a little too much, especially, they're not going to be adherent to do these health promoting behaviors to help them combat and reverse their type 2 diabetes. Also, as was mentioned previously about the type 1 diabetes, alcohol does inhibit fat metabolism and fat breakdown, leading to higher body fat long term. So the alcohol itself may not necessarily raise blood sugar, but it does raise fat in the bloodstream because it inhibits fat metabolism. And it is high in calories at 7 calories per gram. So it is going to be especially affecting our ability to process food and to process blood sugar when we're taking in any alcohol. All right, open up the chat box here. Do you think it is better to drink alcohol alone or with food for better blood sugar control? I have not mentioned this yet. I'm really quizzing you right now. With food, with food, with food, with food. Alone, better not to drink. All right. Food high in fiber would be better. Ooh, winner, winner. All right. So I love all of these answers. Thank you everyone so much for participating. Yes, with food. And of course it does depend what we're eating, right? If you're eating donuts and cupcakes with your alcohol, that's not helpful. So that's an important distinction to make when people say, is alcohol healthy? Well, what are you comparing it to? Are you comparing alcohol to cotton candy and Twinkies? Or are you comparing alcohol to, grape juice? Or what are you comparing it to? So when I say with food, it's not just with any food. It is important, as you see at the bottom of this slide, It's important to include foods that are higher in fibers, a little bit higher in protein, and electrolytes and omega-3s to help reduce inflammation. Eating balanced meals and healthy foods with plenty of fiber, potassium, omega-3s, and protein. This is really going to help to slow down the absorption of that alcohol. And dry red wine is the probably best option based on all of our research here, because the red wine, when it's not that sweet, it really doesn't have that much carbohydrate, liquid carbohydrate in it. It's only about 4 grams of carbohydrates in a 5-ounce glass. Whereas in a sweeter red wine, anything that you're drinking that has a lot of liquid carbohydrates is really, really going to spike your blood sugar, right? So alcohol is not a carbohydrate. Alcohol is its own thing. And the liver is not good at multitasking. So alcohol is going to take priority when it comes to processing. Alcohol does not have a storage space in our body. The liver is going to stop processing everything else. And this can lead to hypoglycemia. So as Ava mentioned, with type 1 diabetics, this is really, really scary. If somebody is drinking spirits on an empty stomach who is diabetic or pre-diabetic, it can really, really lead to significant drops in blood sugar, which can be really, really dangerous, actually. So it is recommended to eat at least 1 hour before or during, to drink at least 1 hour before or while drinking. You should be eating your meal, your nice, healthy, balanced meal. Okay. All right, longevity in alcohol consumption. Where do these two come together? There's a big study, the 2020 Netherlands cohort study, over 7,800 people from the ages of 68 to 70. Can these people live past 90 years old? Based on lots of different questionnaires, they took into account their different lifestyle factors, what they ate, what they drank, and tested 20 years later. There were over 5,000 participants. And they noticed that the alcohol abstainers, they did not do as well as the people who actually drank just 5 to less than 10 grams of alcohol per day. So the highest association with reaching 90 years old compared to abstainers was found at that little amount. And then, of course, anything over than that were higher among non-survivors. So how much is just 5 to less than 10 grams of alcohol per day? I'll see on the next slide. That's just a half to 1.5 glasses of alcohol per day, about 3 to 5 days a week. So actually, that average of about 7.2 grams of alcohol per day, that's about 1/4 ounce average per day. 1/4 ounce. That's like so little of alcohol per day. So this is really, really interesting to notice that it's not a lot at all. And we also, with this big study, it's important to think about, okay, what else are these people eating? How else are they living their life? This is really just in relation to alcohol. And it's also important to think about a holistic approach to our health. Do we really need to be drinking that little alcohol to get in our polyphenols and et cetera, et cetera? If you already drank, remember that the dose is really important to pay attention to. Interestingly, probability of longevity is decreased in women with alcohol intakes at all above 15 grams per day. And in men, longevity remains likely at that amount. So that's why across the board, you'll see recommendations that for women, they shouldn't go over 1 drink per day. For men, shouldn't go over 2 drinks per day. So yeah, for men, the risk decreases. So you're less likely to live to be 90 years old at just 16.5 grams per day. So that's not much more. Men have more body water. Men have more muscle mass than women do. Women have more fat percentage, and fat is much, much, much lower in water. So women have a little bit less of an advantage to being able to metabolize alcohol in an efficient way than men do in general, which is interesting. All right.
Thank you, Katie. So interesting to hear about those epidemiological studies to see what dose has been correlated with the highest longevity or with 90+-year-olds. So now thinking about what are the key takeaways. So I know that there was a question in the chat box about what is a standard drink. So I know that we've been talking about drinks a day and grams a day. So it's really important to all be clear on the same page of what is considered a drink, and in just taking a look at that in terms of the different types of alcohol. So that would be 12 ounces for a beer, 5 ounces for wine, 1.5 ounces for a distilled spirit. And so in considering all of the research that we just presented to you, the recommendation for the longevity diet is to consume maximum 3 to 5 drinks per week. And then of course, there's that asterisk, if you are genetically predisposed to any of the cancers that I spoke about, or if you have that enzyme deficiency, then of course that recommendation would be personalized to you. Also, as Katie had mentioned, if you don't drink, then there's no need to start, because there's so many other ways that you can get those really powerful polyphenols through other drinks and through food. Dry red wine is the healthiest option because it is going to be the most concentrated in resveratrol and the least concentrated in glucose, so likely will have the least impact on blood sugar. It's important to remember that alcohol can contribute to community, to socialization, to this feeling of being at ease with your friends and family. And that is something to definitely be enjoyed. And it's a really important part of the longevity lifestyle. And then alcohol is a part of the balanced longevity diet. So thinking about the broader picture as well, thinking about what foods are you pairing with your alcohol? Are you doing intermittent fasting overnight of the 12 hours that we generally recommend for the majority of the population? Are you getting enough water and exercise and all the other things that we've spoken about throughout this presentation? Okay, so quiz question here. What is the maximum amount of alcoholic drinks recommended per week in the longevity diet? Let's see if you are all listening. Let's see. Yes, 3 to 5, 3 to 5, maximum, yes. Excellent, exactly, yeah. So 3 to 5, really important to mention, 3 to 5 per week. I know when we were talking about cancer, we were talking about per day. When we were talking about neurodegenerative and autoimmune diseases, we were talking about per day. Katie mentioned per week, but for the longevity diet, we recommend maximum 3 to 5 drinks per week. And then second question here, which type of alcohol is associated with the highest longevity related benefits and why? Dry red wine. Yes, red wine, that's dry. Love it. Everyone was paying very close attention.
All right, well, so much great information. Thank you, everyone, and great answers. So now we're going to open up for Q&A. So please write in the Q&A box. I see there are some questions there already. And then Jessica, Katie, and Eva, you guys can go ahead and answer.
Yes, just so that I'm clear, I had a question about going back to the slide, classifying what one drink is. So I just wanted to share this slide once again for those that were inquiring. So 5 ounces of wine, 12 ounces of beer, 1.5 ounces of distilled spirit, or 8 ounces of malt liquor.
Hey, I see this question. Would you be able to please comment on the research challenging the quantity of flavonoids in red wine? Yes, so this is really interesting. I came across research showing that red wine is very concentrated, and I've come across research that shows that you need to drink a lot of red wine to get the amount of flavonoids similar to a couple of handfuls of red grapes, right? So it depends. It depends on the red wine. It depends on how it's processed, how it's been aged. And I think that there's a lot of variety there. So in general, when it comes to getting in your flavonoids, make sure you're getting in a variety of colors. So flavonoids are really those plant pigments, things like pomegranates and the skin of the apple, like things that have that astringency that also have a lot of color, are going to be really, really potent with flavonoids. Usually it's going to be in our different colored fruits and vegetables. But like I said before, lots of different beans as well. There's lots of different colors in beans and even whole grains. So eating lots of different plant foods is going to be your best way to make sure you're getting enough flavonoids. And choosing a really, really dark, high quality dry red wine and just drinking that maximum of 3 to 5 drinks per week is going to be a good way. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Katie. I saw another question here about what are some examples of a dry red wine. Yeah, definitely a Pinot Noir, Cabernet Sauvignon, a Malbec. These are all great options. And then since that was a really quick question, I also just wanted to address the question about what if you drink 3 to 5 drinks all on the weekend? So that's a really interesting question, because as you saw, the majority of the studies were done on drinks per day. And when we looked at the risks associated, it was up to 1 drink a day for women and 2 drinks a day for men. And so ideally, we would be recommending not to exceed these. Also, because we want to consider hydration, we want to consider sleep quality, we want to consider, are you able to regulate your blood sugar? In reality, likely people on the weekends are probably consuming more than 1 drink for women. So I would say maybe like 1 to 2 drinks for women at a time, staying within the 3 to 5 drinks per week window, but trying not to have all of the drinks in one night.
Yeah, I agree. Go
Yeah,
for it.
I can go for a few questions. I see one person asking how to get tested for the enzyme. There's definitely genetic testing available. It depends. I think 23andMe offers it, but you can definitely look into genetic testing for that to see if you have any mutations that would reduce your enzyme activity. I know it's very common in Asian populations to have reduced activity of the enzyme to break down alcohol. So something that can be a telltale sign is if you flush a lot when you drink alcohol, that is basically a sign that you're not breaking down the alcohol properly. Okay, and I see another one that I thought would be interesting to answer. If that you rarely drink alcohol at home, but can have 2 to 3 drinks, a cocktail and up to 2 glasses of wine. Can I indulge in this way without concern, or should I keep it to 1 drink even when out? Also, is it true that when cooking wine burns off all the alcohol? I can answer that second one quickly. Cooking can burn away the alcohol. I think it takes about 3 hours of cooking to make sure that most of the alcohol is gone. I was just checking that I think after 15 minutes, there's still about 40% of the alcohol that's retained. So definitely the longer you cook, the more of the alcohol is cooked away. As to your drinking, let's see, you rarely have alcohol at home. This sounds like you're doing, on average, you're averaging less than 3 to 5 drinks per week if this is once a month. So it doesn't sound like it's exceeding our recommendations. What do you guys think, Jessica and Katie?
I think that I would love to be like, of course, that's fine. Like, that sounds good. Unfortunately, whenever we're going over about a drink a day for women, we're really increasing our risk of our carcinogenic effect, and really the harmful effects of alcohol start to really hit us above a drink a day for women in general. So that average, I think that it would be really nice if we could put it all together, like, well, let me just have 30 drinks once a month, right? One day
Well,
a month.
yeah,
Does
yeah,
not
that
work
would
like
be
that at all.
excessive.
And that would be really, really nice. And I will have to recommend, it depends what your health goals are, right? If you're feeling totally fine, if you're otherwise healthy, if you're able to, you're not struggling with anything else, I think that you should probably be fine with that, especially if you're compensating with other health promoting behaviors. This is quite individualized, so do use the discount codes here and maybe meet with us to go over what is recommended for you. But I'm gonna have to say, like, actually, the 1 drink a day seems to be, especially with what I went over with diabetes, and you're going to be at risk of overeating other things and not getting quality sleep and not processing your food properly, et cetera, et cetera. That really happens above 1 drink per day for women, unfortunately.
I will next speak about this question. Really interesting. Thank you for asking this, Robert. He asked, can you address the alcoholic beverage industry's conflicts of interest with the authors of the studies you quoted? And this is something that we are always considering when reading research, and especially the cancer research that we were looking at. These are major meta-analyses. As I had shared for the breast cancer meta-analysis that we reviewed, it looked at 118 different individual studies and then analyzed the data. And what I had shared in terms of those risk factors was combining all of that information. So most of the research that we shared today actually came from meta-analyses, which are the most reliable in terms of making sure that they're considering a larger population and there is not more potential bias. And so we worked to present the information that is the most accurate available out there. But thank you for that question.
Wow, great questions, everybody. Thank you so much. And thank you. This is really fun. Okay, so does exercise speed up digestion of alcohol and drinking plenty of water while drinking alcohol? This is a great question. When it comes to drinking plenty of water while drinking alcohol, water is going to help a lot. Alcohol is quite dehydrating, so it's going to help to hydrate us. However, alcohol, water, carbohydrates, like these are all very, very, very different things. And the capacity that our body, to my knowledge, maybe Ava and Jessica, you might know better about this actually. But to my understanding, it's still going to have to run its course the same way. And when it comes to, does exercise speed up digestion of alcohol? I'm so curious what you mean by that, as far as exercising beforehand, exercising afterwards. And I don't think it necessarily would, but I definitely need to do more research on that. And I'm curious to hear your answers. And I quickly want to answer the question after that. If I've had estrogen positive breast cancer, should I never have a drink again? ? I did stop drinking, would drink less than once a month, but was hoping to have a drink on occasion. So if you've been after 2 years, if you've been in remission and totally cancer free, using the recommendations that we talked about today, eating healthy longevity diet approach, other health promoting behaviors, sticking to 1 drink or of the dry red wine when you do decide to drink, if coupled, not drinking too much, that should be totally fine, even if you've had estrogen positive breast cancer in the past, right? What we really don't want to do is totally binge drink and totally, overindulge on things that might exacerbate breast cancer. Yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts as well, Jessica and Ava.
Yeah, so I completely agree, especially after the 2-year mark. I think that the recommendations of 3 to 5 drinks a week definitely applies. If you look back at the very beginning of this presentation, just looking at how risk does increase And that would relate to increased risk of reoccurrence for those who are moderate and heavy drinkers. But that is for people that are having more than one drink a day. So I would really stick to one drink per day, and then 3 to 5, or one drink at a time, then 3 to 5 drinks maximum per week. Also, I just want to share that it's hypothesized that potentially the estrobolome has a role in breast cancer risk. So the estrobolome encompasses the species of bacteria in a woman's microbiome that metabolizes estrogen. And Ava briefly mentioned it. This is a whole other topic that we could talk about for hours, but alcohol has been shown to disrupt the microbiome, even one drink. And so potentially alcohol is impacting the microbes that produce an enzyme that is essentially metabolizing estrogen. So there can be a correlation there in terms of alcohol increasing circulating estrogen. So something just to consider, but especially once you're in remission, then there are benefits to alcohol in red wine specifically, as we shared.
Yeah, I would totally agree with Jessica and Katie. And if it is something that brings you joy on occasion, you still should pursue those things, obviously in moderation and, with these recommendations that we've talked about in mind. I also wanted to go back to the exercise speeding up digestion of alcohol. I was just checking. It doesn't look like it affects the metabolism. It doesn't seem to accelerate the metabolism of alcohol in any way. So that's sort of all I've found so far, but that was a really interesting question. And definitely, yeah, water is so important to keep you hydrated.
All right, looks like we have time for one more quick question if any of you want to answer, and then we're gonna move on.
Well, we are getting a lot of questions, and I don't think we have time for them. And please do, the email is right there too.
Please
I would love
us an email. Yeah, I think it's in the chat box. And then we will get back to those questions that were not answered. I also see some that are very personalized as well. So feel free to email us. And as I was mentioning earlier, we do have promotions. So please take advantage of the code WINE2023 and you get 30% off on the initial consultation with a dietitian, where you can get a more personalized recommendation on a lot of different things, including alcohol recommendations. So please take advantage of it. And thank you everyone so much for attending our webinar tonight. And we will see you next time.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.